So, welcome. I see that we've got quite a lot of mediators. As this was one for the general public, do feel free to take tips and pass on the information. So, why am I supporting IMA? It's because I really think that mediation needs to be more accessible, and we really need to, as mediators, encourage people to start the whole conflict resolution process a lot earlier. My background is I trained and accredited as a mediator in 2014. I've done about over 175 cases. I specialize in mediations that are not just about money, but also values and relationships. Most of my mediations are third sector, workplace, things like boards and education and special needs education mediations. Most of mine have recently been online, as you all know why. I do also do telephone mediations, and a lot of my mediations are non-lawyer mediations. So before taking up full-time conflict resolution, I worked in the private, public, and health sector. I trained as a nurse and a midwife before moving on to research and then management and business ownership. So I've had a varied career. And then since we sold our business, I spent over a decade providing consultancy and training, mainly to smaller organizations. So today, we're going to talk about difficult conversations and what makes the conversation awkward. Complaints, negative feelings, money is often an awkward conversation to have. Mistakes are hard to admit to. It might be situational, it might be cultural, it might be about different values. So when does it matter that the conversation is awkward? Because sometimes it doesn't really matter. You know, you sort of dance around somebody in the supermarket and it's a bit awkward, but that doesn't matter. When it's really important is when the stakes are high, when if the conversation goes wrong, you get into a lot of trouble. When there's a fear of a loss or a threat to somebody's survival, somebody's business, somebody's important relationship. You know it's important when the emotions start running rampant. And obviously, it's not that awkward if you agree on it, because at least the important things you agree on. So what happens and why do we often get it wrong when it's really, really important to get it right? And even if you're the most perfect mediator in the world, unless you're God or somebody, you will get it wrong. And I continually have to work on keeping my mouth shut or speaking up when I should do. And that's because we're all hardwired in the caveman days. So when a threat or a challenge or a perceived threat or a challenge, whether it's a saber-toothed tiger or whether it's your boss saying, you've got this wrong, what happens is an evolutionary physical response. So our hearts start beating faster, our breathing speeds up. What then happens is the cycle starts and your blood is diverted from your stomach and your brain. And this is why you often feel a bit sick when you start thinking, uh-oh, something's going wrong here. And it's recognizing those first signs. What then happens if the cycle continues is you go into the fight, flight, or freeze response. I'm not going into all the science, but you just basically need to know your brain switches off. Everything that makes you the sensible, logical, organized person switches off, and the extent to which it switches off is the extent to which there's the threat. So sometimes that's really really helpful, because if someone's chasing you with an axe, you don't want to sort of think, what shall I say to him? You want to either get ready to fight, flight, or hide. And what happens, as well as your brain switching off, is you start pumping out adrenaline and cortisone, all those steroids that you know make you stronger and faster. But steroids also have an action on you, and that makes you more angry, more fearful, and able to only see the negative. They've discovered your focus actually narrows when you're in that flight or fight response. Your hearing only hears specific sounds. And that's because in a physical situation, it's much safer to assume things are going to go wrong. But if you are trying to convince someone else to be calm, your aggression and anger will make them more aggressive and angry. And this is helpful as a mediator to be aware of, to be able to spot those signs of someone perhaps breathing faster, looking anxious, understanding what's happening to them and how important it is that we stay calm. So why should we start conversations early? Just, Joe, could you do me a favor? I'm going to get everyone to, first of all, put in when mediators are called in. Just put, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And then if you can just do a quick, when people think mediators are called in. You got some numbers?
Do you want me to run a quick poll?
No, just ask them to put it in the chat.
Okay, they're coming through.
Mm-hmm.
We can't see your slides, Nancy. I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, I'm really sorry. There we go.
Okay, I've had one response so far to your...
I'll just go back there. Sorry. I was so in the mood there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe.
That's all right. There we go. That's the slide Nancy's referring to.
Okay, so what's the general?
Okay, so we've got, I would say 5 is proving the most popular.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. We do have a 2. Got 2 2s.
Yeah.
4s and 5s. So we definitely haven't got any 1s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that would be expensive if every time we disagree about tea and coffee we brought in a mediator.
We do have some 6s.
A lot of times people will call in a lawyer before they'll call in a mediator, and they will only call in a mediator once the lawyers have gotten stuck or just before they go to court. One of the things about handling, I always talk about conflict first aid. So I think everyone, including children, should be taught how to manage conflicts constructively, because you can't get rid of conflicts. Conflicts start with unmet need, and what people tend to do is jump from their unmet need straight to blaming somebody for it. And then the other person will blame right back. Sometimes it starts over little things. I've seen people have a difference between tea and coffee. Now that doesn't really matter, but then they start disagreeing about which is the best drink. Coffee is really bad for you. It becomes a problem when the person who thinks that coffee is bad for you is in charge of the refreshments for all the staff meetings, and they ban coffee. Yeah. And then that starts a dispute, because it suddenly becomes not just about coffee, T, but about control and about influence and about people start taking stuff personally. So ideally, I'll talk about it at the end. What people need first is training. And I think mediators have a role in training, in coaching people how to manage disputes, in giving people, I always like to think I'm making myself redundant by giving people the skills. I've never managed it yet, and I don't think I will, but we really need to help people learn how to make decisions when things show up and not wait till they blow up. And there are a lot of skills that are quite easy to learn that give you that first aid training. So I'm going to give you a few little tools, and I use these tools myself, not just in mediation, but in everyday life. And people do think that I'm calmer than I was. My whole journey started with a wonderful book called Crucial Conversations. If you haven't read it, it is fantastic. Crucial Conversations started out of research in management. And they discovered that managers who managed crucial conversations better were far more successful and their teams were much happier. And it's about managing those conversations in your relationships at home, with your kids, with your colleagues. And it's just great. Anyway, so the first tool that you need to know, and we were talking about that fog of fear and anger that happens when we go into the fight or flight response. And there's a very, very simple tool that probably your grandmother possibly taught you. And I call it pause. And that is actually switching on another instinctive reaction called the calm and control response, which triggers your vagus nerve. So what I'd like you all to do, here's a little bit of interactive thing. I want you to think of a situation that either makes you angry or frightened, but I don't want you to choose a really bad situation. I want you to choose a situation that's on a 4 or 5 in a scale where a 1 is you're not the least bit bothered, and a 10 is, oh my goodness, life is ending. Okay? So have you all got something in mind? You don't have to share it. It's all inner exercises. So I want you to try and feel what you felt at the start of that. Imagine it's just starting. So you maybe feel your heart rate start going faster. What I want you to do now is just stop. Ask, is my instinctive response keeping me safe from danger? If it is, then, run away and choose another thing for this exercise. If not, take some breaths, and I want you to breathe as I count. So I want you to breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In, 3, 4, hold, out, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. If you do that 3 times, it doesn't take very long, but that should actually slow and strengthen your heartbeat, and you'll find your brain switches back on. You can then choose, because the instinctive sort of chemical reaction only lasts 90 seconds. And if you can get a grip of your emotions, you can then choose how you want to respond, right? You might choose to carry on being angry, but after that first instinctive thing, it's then a choice. Then once you've got your brain engaged, there's 3 questions, and I call them finding the pin, taking responsibility, and planning for success. Finding the pin comes from a philosopher, Émile Auguste Chartier, who said that most people don't get angry with babies who cried. Now, he lived in the days when babies had nappy pins. They didn't have these wonderful pull-up or stick-on nappies. And he says, when a child cries and you've fed them and they've slept, you start looking for the pin because you assume that there's a reason why they behave that way. We don't do that with other people. We judge them on their behavior. We say, oh, they're rude. Oh, they're so thoughtless. They don't know. But we judge ourselves on our own motives. So if we bump into someone accidentally, we know it's accidental. But if someone bumps into us, we go, oh, they're not looking where they're going. Yeah. So the question for finding the pin is, what would make a reasonable person do that? And just ask yourself, so I wonder, so instead of being furious, be curious. Ask, what would make a reasonable person do that? The second bit, which is a lot harder for all of us, is taking responsibility. Even in a situation that it doesn't seem like it's your fault at all, we have all done something that contributes to the problem. And if you get it straight in your own head, what you did that contributed to the problem, and if you lead with that, you are far more likely to get the result you want. Yeah. And then the third question, which is planning for success, is what do I want and how do I get a good result? So if you keep in mind that other people might not change, and if they do, the only reason they will change is because you change the way you react to them. So keeping in mind what you want from the situation will help you get it right. And finally, the third tool, how to be a star with difficult conversations. So the S is that you need to state the purpose of the conversation. Yeah. So if you're delivering it as coaching, tell people, I'm doing this because I believe that you can do a better job than you're doing now. And so often we assume people know what the purpose of our conversation is. But if you start with you're doing it wrong, people will feel attacked and they'll go into the fight or flight and they will switch off and they won't hear anything else you say. So start with the purpose of the conversation. Start with something that you both agree on. Show what's in it for them. Why should they listen to this conversation? And make it safe. And how you make that safe is by taking control of your emotions. As I said, be curious, not furious. Tell what you want and what you don't. So many of us think other people are mind readers, that anybody would know. I've done mediations where they say, well, everyone should know, everyone says hello every time they come into the room. And it's like, well, I don't, and it's just rude if you don't. So you need to be quite specific. We can't blame other people for not knowing what we want if we don't tell them. And talk tentatively. When we judge, people will react defensively or offensively. If you ask someone, this is what I think, what do you think? have I got it right? Is that what you meant when you said? Accept the responsibility on your part. If you do that, you will find other people will accept responsibility as well. If you ask for their view of the situation, ask them for their solutions. Appreciate that they may see things differently, that if they see cheese as halloumi and you see cheese as Edam, it doesn't mean that, you know, you're both wrong or one of you is wrong. And assess what's really realistic. Sometimes, you know, the best thing is to break a relationship or leave a job. So assess what's realistic and respect each other's views. You don't have to agree to be kind. If the solution they suggest is not acceptable, what's your solution? What are the options? Record the decisions taken and check them with each other, because so often, if you don't do that, you go away thinking that they've agreed to do something as soon as possible. And to you, that means tomorrow. And to them, that means, well, when I have time and I'm not so busy. And finally, review your own performance. Think about, okay, where did I go wrong with that? What could I have done better? Because it's really a continual process. So when should we call in professionals? I've got some workplace mediations where they've tried to resolve things internally and it's been a disaster. Other times I would, you know, say, actually, you know, this is a good way you can resolve it internally and it solves things. So I would suggest there's a couple of reasons which would make you think that possibly you should call in an external professional. Sometimes there's a need for impartiality, certainly a need to be seen as impartial. So if there's a lot of anger and people are starting to take sides, bringing in someone from outside will show impartiality. As I said, if there's extreme emotion, it can be hard to think straight. If you're only going to get one chance at doing it right, you want to make sure that whoever comes in really knows what they're doing. If they're complex or sensitive issues, and if it's really important and the stakes are very high, sorry, I've said that. And if there are multiple people informed, so there's lots of different views of what the right thing is, you probably need a skilled facilitator to get everybody seeing things the same way. And the other reason for bringing in an external person is once someone has kind of gone bleh, which is always the first stage in a mediation or conflict coaching, people will just vent. And they vented in a safe place because I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to remember. I have a wonderful sort of rinsing mechanism in my brain. And I'm not going to take it personally. So they can curse and swear, they can say whatever they like. And that's like releasing the pus in an infected wound. And then people can start to heal. And then people can calm down. Now, if you do that with somebody that you're going to have an ongoing relationship with, they might remember, but even if they don't, you're always going to remember that they've seen you at a time when you perhaps weren't that happy with yourself, and maybe you're a little ashamed of it. So if you've brought in an external person who takes away all the dirty laundry, it leaves everybody with a clean slate. And sometimes that's a really important reason for bringing in someone from outside. So to go back to the slide, a conflict resolution professional can help in a lot of areas. Mediation traditionally is brought in at dispute. It works best when it's brought in before you call in the police or the lawyers or the kind of bringing in those forceful things, because people like to be able to feel that they choose. And that's the great thing with mediation, is that it's not an enforced decision. It's a decision that two people have come together to make. And you're much more likely to make that if you're calm and you're talking about things before damage is done. Coaching can help from disagreement through to dispute. If the other side really doesn't want to talk, then coaching can sometimes help someone untangle themselves from a conflict and step away. Training, it's good to start the training when people see differences and explaining to people that just because someone believes differently from you, it doesn't mean that they don't respect your opinion. So, as I said, there's lots of places that mediators, conflict coaches can help people learn how to deal with difficult conversations. So we've gone over what makes a conversation awkward, when it's really important to get those difficult conversations right, and why so often when it really, really matters to get it right, that we get it wrong. Why we should deal with things as they show up, not wait until they blow up. What you can do to get it right more often. When to call in a professional and how they can help. And I love this quote from Helen Keller, which is, "One painful duty fulfilled." In other words, if you do your difficult, awkward conversations well, will make the next steps plainer and easier.